Oh, hi, can you hear me?
I can. Hello, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Very well, thank you. I'm in a slightly windy place. I'm trying to, well, a very windy place. I'm ducked down under the embankment and behind a reed, so I hope it won't be too bad.
So I'm Nirvana. So I'm a program assistant at the Ministry of Eco, and I'm the head of the London Schools Eco Network.
All
So
right,
these questions actually came from the students um,
brilliant, fantastic.
at the
Well, I look
LSEN.
forward to hearing them.
Great. It's really nice to have you um, on this call. Where are you right now?
So I'm on, well, thanks for having me, first of all. It's lovely to be here. I'm on the banks of the River Yare, which is in the Norfolk Broads in the east of England. So we've been walking for, this is our day 13. We started in Cambridge and we walked through the Cambridgeshire and Norfolk Fens, then round the coast of Norfolk to the easternmost point of Norfolk at Great Yarmouth. And now we've walked inland towards Norwich. So we spent 2 days walking through this fantastic, great big wetland, which is the Norfolk Broads. So I'm crouched down out of the wind. Behind me is a big embankment. So the River Yare is passing there, and there's a big embankment, which is what stops the high tide toppling over the side of the River Yare. And we're in this lowlands beneath the embankment. So interestingly, in this place, the the land is much lower than the river. So if the river floods, it will flood big areas of land, and that's one of the reasons why we've come here to look at this area.
Wow. Well, I've got some questions for you about your walk from students in years 10 to 13, so between the ages of 14 and 18, who are all members of the London Schools Eco Network. And the first question is kind of about what your experience of the walk has been like so far.
It's been fantastic. It's been fantastic on so many levels. The One of the best things has been all the support I've received from other people. Lots of people have walked with me, so we've had, fantastic conversations along the way. I've People have offered to let me stay at their house, so I haven't had to camp on the beach. People have offered to carry my bags and give me food. People in cafes don't let me pay for my tea after I explain what it's about. So that support has been brilliant. It's also been wonderful, like really, really interesting to see all these places that are threatened by different aspects of sea level rise. We could read about them online, or we hear about them in geography classes, but to actually see these processes going on has been really fascinating. So just by chance, when we were on the Norfolk coast last week, there was a really, really big tide. So the September spring tide is always the highest tide of the year. But in addition to that, there was a storm last week, the first named storm of the season, called Storm Agnes, and that caused a storm surge of an additional zero
Wow.
point 0.4 meters above the really, really big tide. So we got to see places um, that were underwater, that were flooded by these high tides at Wells Harbour. Wells is a big town on the Norfolk coast, and every time I've visited Wells, the level of the water, when I look out, you have to look out over the harbour and look down to the level of the water. But it was like 3 centimeters from the top of the wall. It was so close to pouring over um, and flooding the town. So it was really striking. It reminded me that when we talk about climate change, it's not. We always talk about it as an issue for the future, but it's happening now,
Mm.
and these things are happening now. So it's been, I don't know. It's been a real eye opener and a real privilege to see these things, and it's also just been lovely to get to know my county better. I lived in Madagascar for 10 years. I've travelled to different places, but I don't really know my own county where I live, and it's just been so nice to walk across it and get more of a feel for it. So just been lots of wonderful things.
Amazing. Well, the second question kind of follows on from that because it's about why did you choose this specific location? But it sounds like part of it was because you're actually from that area.
Yeah, yeah. So I live in West Norfolk and I love walking. So I've often walked along the Norfolk coast and in the fens, just by myself. I just enjoy doing it to enjoy nature and get away. So I'd started to have this sort of ambition of walking the whole coast in one just for myself. And then I realized that, if I was going to do that, then maybe I could use that to help raise awareness of the threats these places face. But even then, I wasn't so sure because we know about sea level rise. We've heard about this threat for a long time, and coasts threatened by sea level rise isn't much of a story. It's not much of a headline. But I was looking at the flood risk maps and noticed that it's not just the coasts that were threatened. There are big
Absolutely.
inland areas in the south of England, like the Norfolk Broads, like the fens of Cambridgeshire and Lincolnshire and West Norfolk, that are also threatened. And I realized that these flood risk zones, they stretch right into the middle of Cambridge and Norwich. And that really struck me. I thought, how can it be that, even big cities are threatened and nobody's talking about this? How could that be? So I find it strange that, we're not talking about this. So I wanted to do something about it. And so it was, a nice way to combine my love of walking and the outdoors with this really strong this drive I feel to get people to pay attention to these really, really big things that are happening and do something about it. And then I thought, if even the fact that these areas are threatened isn't a headline grabbing story, and even the fact that people will lose their homes soon isn't making it into the news, then maybe if I put a snorkel on, and it will help, just make people take notice. And that's just what I'm trying to do, get people to talk about it, get people that live in these places to talk about it and do something about it.
Yeah, grab that media attention. So another question is, how did you make sure that your walk was causing as least possible destruction to the environment as possible? Because a lot of times these kind of environmental campaigns can kind of inadvertently be damaging. So someone asked, how did you make sure you were avoiding that where you could?
Yeah, that's an important point. And, I've always been an environmentalist all my life. I try to, minimize my own impacts in every way. I think we've had very little impact, really. I've not had a support car or anything like that. We've carried all our stuff on our backs. Unfortunately, I've not been able to minimize my impact as much as I can when I'm at home. For example, when you're eating food on the run, it's hard to get places in little shops that aren't covered in loads of plastic, and it's been hard to have a strictly plant-free diet the whole time I've been away as well. But in terms of impact, out in the places we're walking through, we're treading very lightly. We're just walking. We're not leaving any destruction behind us. We're not having fires or anything like that. It's an important point, but I would like to just add that, while it's important that we all try and minimize our own environmental footprints in our own lives, there's a real limit to focusing only on ourselves.
Oh, of course.
If I focused only on my own footprint, I might be able to keep 10 tons of emissions out of the atmosphere. But if I take action politically, if I take action at the level of my work or other things, I can have a much bigger impact by inspiring other people. And I think that's the key thing we need to all remember. We're not just individual consumers. We are people that can inspire others through our leadership, through talking about this. So when I think of, our personal action about climate change, yes, our own impact is one part of it, but we must think so much bigger than that.
Well, that's such a great message for the LSCN as well, because these are the leaders of the future. Have there been any really challenging parts of this walk, or what would you say has been the most challenging part?
Actually, the most challenging part has been a practical one. It's been management, because, ironically, what this whole walk stems from my love of walking in the outdoors quietly by myself without my phone. And and the more it's grown momentum, this has grown much bigger than I ever envisaged. I originally just invited a few friends to join me, a few friends from my activist groups, and then they said, "Oh, well, let's do a website, let's do social media, let's do lots of media, let's get other people involved. So in the end, I've had to spend, half my time on my phone trying to organize other people to meet along the way, trying to organize like
Things like
press
this.
interviews and record it, doing stuff like this. Wonderful, wonderful stuff. Doing, recording little explainer videos for Twitter and stuff. And I've really, really, really enjoyed doing it. But it's meant that actually the challenge hasn't been a physical one. The challenge has been like just as much mental and stress related as it has been about tired feet.
Well, thank you for agreeing to do this call
It's my
anyway.
absolute pleasure. It's one of the most important things I've done on the whole walk. So thank you so
Wow.
much for organizing it.
So there were a few questions now about kind of places that are threatened by sea rise, because like you said, it's not just the coast, it's kind of inland places as well. So one of them was, are there any places that you could say are at risk within the next few years of being flooded?
Yeah, absolutely. So in West Norfolk, on about day 6 of our walk, we went through a place called Heacham. Um, Heacham is a place with very high tidal range, so the high tides are high and the low tides are very low. And the first line of defense is a shingle ridge. Shingle is like pebbles that the beach is made of, and it's it forms a ridge at the back of the beach, and that's what stops the waves going over it. But every winter, the storms are getting bigger and the tides are getting bigger, and they're washing away at the base of the shingle ridge. So the Environment Agency and the council, who manage those defences, they have to use bulldozers to sweep the shingle back into a ridge every year. Now, the cost of maintaining that shingle ridge has gone from £1 million a year to £8 million a year. And
Wow.
basically the Environment Agency have what they call a hold the line policy. We're gonna hold this defense, we're gonna stop the sea coming in, and they have that hold the line policy until 2025. They're going to produce a report next year, and next year they might decide that 8 million quid is too much. We can't keep on doing this. We're going to stop building up these defences, and then within a year or two, the water will come in through those defences, and that land will be underwater. Then it will be salt marsh. Then now there's a second line of defences further on, but there's a caravan park and a big area of wetland, part of the Wild Ken Hill Reserve, where they film BBC Springwatch, and that will be under threat if the council decide not to keep the defences. It's a policy called managed realignment, but it's essentially it's managed retreat. It's letting the sea in, and again, this is happening right now. It's not a future thing.
Right. Okay. So it is something we have to be thinking about and finding solutions for now. Um, in that case, how do you have any advice on how we can prioritize the kind of places we protect or campaign for?
That is such an important question, and I don't know the answer, to be honest. I think who am I or who is any of us to choose which places are more important? Every place is a place that's a home to someone and beloved of someone. I've seen places that I walked through around Bacton and Haysborough three days ago on the northeast Norfolk coast, which is the most rapidly eroding coastline in Europe. Because so there, the problem's not floods, it's erosion, because the land is much higher. It's a terminal moraine left by a glacier, but it's not rock, it's just sand and gravel. So when the waves hit those cliffs, they just crumble, right? And houses are crumbling into the sea. And along there are places where the defenses that haven't been maintained since the 1980s, and they're crumbling. But there's also a huge gas terminal there called Bacton Gas Terminal, and all the people that live there are just outraged by the amount of money that gets spent to reinforce the defences ahead of Bacton Gas Terminal, but the money isn't being spent to reinforce the defences in front of their houses. So these are political decisions, and they're being made now, I think, and and that's it's a really interesting thing to contemplate. So this is a fascinating question. I don't think it's really I can really answer it right now. Sorry. Also, it's the case that I've been walking 13 days, and I don't think my brain's really working properly anymore. Um, I think rather than just focusing on the question of what are we going to defend, I think the more important thing is we need to stop the harm from getting worse. So for me, I think, in this climate crisis, there are two areas of action. One is adaptation. How do we survive the effects of climate change? How do we minimize and cope with the effects of climate change? But the other is mitigation. How do we stop climate change getting worse? In other words, you know, transitioning away from fossil fuels as quickly as possible, and stopping destroying nature as quickly as possible. Now, whilst it's not easy of us to, we can't all find a role in defending um, vulnerable coastal communities, but we can all find the role in accelerating the transition away from fossil fuels. And that's really what I'm trying to do in my with this walk. Like, my walk's partly about raising awareness, but one thing I've found is that everybody is aware. Like, everybody we've spoken to along the way
Oh
knows this
yeah.
happening, and they're all really scared. But we need to move beyond raising awareness, and we need to, get into action. People need to, we'll avoid climate change. We'll avoid the worst of climate change when everybody is making that essential focus of our lives. So governments find it impossible to ignore. So the key message from my walk really is not just to be aware of what's happening, but to do something about it. So we've been handing out bookmarks. We've handed out thousands and thousands of bookmarks. The bookmarks will take you to our website, walkinginwater.com, and we've got a page there with 10 things that everybody can do. And everyone in the London Schools Environment Network can do. So I'd love to send you, I'll grab your address another time. I'd love to send you a
Absolutely.
batch of these bookmarks, for all the wonderful students that are part of the network. But
Oh,
in the meantime,
fantastic.
please do look at walkinginwater.com and the What You Can Do page. And I hope you'll find some inspiration there for things you can do in your own lives, at school, at work, in your communities, and through campaigning and activism as well.
Amazing. Well, that leads on really nicely to one of our last questions, which is
Sorry if I've already
um,
answered.
no, I mean, yeah, it leads on, which is, do you think that other places in the UK that are at risk of being similarly affected should stage similar events? So, for example, we're in London, and if you look at the map of how the Thames might flood if the Thames barrier fails, a whole swathe of London is set to be underwater. So, do you think that we should be doing similar awareness raising campaigns, or should it be more direct action, like you said?
I think this is such a multifaceted crisis that we need everything. This is an emergency. We need to try everything. Yes, I think it is a good idea to raise awareness of sea level rise in threatened places. But then, sea level rise is just one of dozens and dozens of impacts of the climate crisis. Food security, even people in otherwise very safe seeming cities on higher grounds still need to eat food, and climate impacts on food production is a global issue. And I don't know. It's we think in terms of vulnerable places and the most vulnerable places, but in reality, nowhere is safe, and no one is safe, because this is because everywhere in the world is interconnected, and climate crisis is something that affects everything. So I think there is a danger to messaging that says, "Oh, you must only act because you're in danger," because by the time you wait until your neighborhood is in danger, it's too late by then. You know what I mean? We really
Yeah,
need to act
yeah.
long time before that. We need to act now. Um, Yeah,
Wow.
sorry,
Yeah.
sorry, my brain's gone dead. Couldn't
Oh,
even finish my sentence.
no, that's all right. I mean, we're kind of on the last one now, and I don't want to make you try and remember everything that's on your website, especially because you've been walking for so long. But it was asked, what is the highest impact action that a young person can do to mitigate the effects of rising sea levels, climate crisis, um, that they can do themselves?
It's to talk about it. I think undoubtedly it's to talk about it and tell the people you know, tell the people you love how important it is to you. Because so I'm really inspired by a psychology experiment that was carried out in the late 60s. And sorry, do you have time for like a 3 minute story? Maybe
Yeah,
if I
sure. If that's, I mean, it's our last question, so I'd be really interested to hear it. Yeah.
So it was an experiment they carried out where they asked people to come to a meeting, and then they put them in a waiting room and asked them to fill out a questionnaire. Then they started pumping smoke under the doors into the waiting room. When that happened, the participants almost always they got up to find somebody to warn them about the smoke within 2 minutes, right? But then they repeated the experiment with actors who were told to, so the waiting room was filled with other people, and they were told to notice the smoke and then just carry on acting as if nothing has happened. So when that happened, the study participants, they noticed the smoke, but then they looked around them and they didn't see anyone else acting as if it was a problem. So, they thought, oh, maybe I'm overreacting. Maybe these people know something I don't. Maybe I misunderstood. And when that in that situation, the participants would sit there for 20 minutes while the room filled with smoke, and they wouldn't get up to warn anybody just because no one else was doing it. And I think that's a bit like where our society is now, right? We've all heard the warnings that this is like an emergency and the most serious imaginable crisis. But then we look around us and no one else is acting as if it's an emergency. No one else is talking about it. No one else is doing anything about it. So we think, oh, maybe it's not so important after all. If it was important, everyone would be talking about it, right? Surely, but they're not, so it can't be important. And so we have this weird like spiral of silence, and we all think that nobody else cares about it because everyone's silent, when we know that everyone does care about it because the polling shows
Yeah.
that. So I think just by talking about it and say, actually, this is important, I care, we allow other people to care too, and we break this spiral of silence. And I think it's just hugely powerful by showing a bit of leadership in our own lives. So yeah, I think and then of course that's something we can all do. It's difficult, it can be difficult, but don't forget, most people aren't crazy, deranged, aggressive denialists who don't even believe the evidence of their own eyes or anything. Most people aren't like that, so you don't have to be scared that your conversations will be confrontational, because almost always they're not. Almost always you'll find that people agree with you and also want to do things in their own lives.
Well, that is a really amazing message to leave them for the end of our call. So thank you so much for taking time out of your no exhausting walk to talk with us and answer our questions.
Thank you so much, Nirvana, and thank you, LSEN. And you just, yeah, have courage, guys. I'm so excited to to hear about the amazing things you'll be doing as a network going forward. So yeah, keep going.
Thank you. Thanks. All right. I'm just